Self-awareness is not just the idea that you've gone to therapy or you've listened to some feedback or you've taken a personality assessment or two. Those tools are all worthwhile. If you do them, if you use them, keep doing them. But self-awareness is deeper. It's more expansive than that because you are deeper and more expansive. You are not defined by a personality assessment. Self-awareness is the ongoing relationship that we have with ourselves. It's the understanding of who we are and also who we're not. How we think, how we respond to things, how we make our choices, why we make our choices, and how we engage and connect with the people and the world around us. The problem is we're so conditioned to be doers that we spend a lot of our time escaping those quiet moments with ourselves when we can learn about who we are because it feels too uncomfortable to not be doing something. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what self-awareness is and how you can develop it. Because by the way, developing self-awareness, that's how things get good. So let's go. Welcome to episode 1. This first episode has been a long time coming. I am so happy to be doing this and to have you listening to this. When Does It Get Good has been in the works, I think, for more years than I can count. I named the podcast When Does It Get Good? Because at some point, if you're like me, you may have looked around at your life, which, by the way, looks pretty good. But you may have asked yourself, so is this it? Am I doing it right? Is this success? Because it doesn't feel quite the way I thought it would. And I've been there. I've had a 25-year career so far. That's hopefully got another 25 or 30 left in it. I spent the first 15 years of my career as a marketer. I worked in media. I worked in magazines. The job that I had right before I left that industry was that I was the national marketing director for a women's magazine called Health Magazine. I'm pretty sure it's still on the shelves. And I got the job. I was 29 years old. So yay, I beat my goal of becoming a director by the time I was 30. I was sitting in my office with a lovely window. And I was on the 30-something floor of the Time and Life building in Midtown Manhattan because I'm a former New Yorker. And I looked around and I thought, so is this it? Because it felt the same as it had felt the month prior before I had that job. And so what we're going to explore in this podcast is how you get from where you are to where you want to go and get it to feel good along the way. And there's a lot that goes into this, and it takes work, and it takes ongoing, continuous work. And by the way, it's not just about what you do. It's more about who you're being. So now I'm an executive coach and also a leadership advisor. And if I had to sum up what I do in one sentence, I would say I get paid to help leaders feel more comfortable in their own skin. So they can stop pushing the boulders up the hills. They can stop people pleasing, questioning their judgment, and just give them opportunity to find how they can lead in ways that are natural and fluid for them. And what I do doesn't just apply to leadership, because eventually we start talking about personal things, emotions and struggles and challenges that get in their way, because we are one person and everything we do at work connects with what we do at home and vice versa. So if you think that you're one way here and another way there, I would challenge that. We are the same person. We might learn to manage ourselves a little differently in different situations, but we pretty much show up as who we are in every situation. And with all of the people that I've coached and the thousands of people that I've trained over the last decade, the thing that I've noticed, the one theme that stands out the most prominently is that everyone just wants peace of mind. They want things that work. They want to do things that feel good. Obviously, we want to make good money and be able to take care of ourselves and our families, but they want to feel congruent and aligned with themselves, not pretzeling themselves to be something that they think they should be or feel pressure to be. The key to that is knowing who we are. The key is self-awareness. I have said this since I was 17 years old. We live in our bodies our entire lives, yet we're the last people we get to know. And why is that? I have a theory. I think it's because we are not rewarded for getting to know ourselves. No one ever got a bonus for being the most self-aware, although I wish we did, because that might change the state of corporate America if we did. But no, we're rewarded for producing tangible things that can be bought and sold and looked at and admired and coveted by other people. So we get distracted from ourselves. And then one day we're looking around when we're in the 30-something floor in an office in the Time and Life building in Midtown Manhattan and go, so what the hell happened? Because I have all the things, but something still feels off. So let's start with what self-awareness is, because you're smart and this is not a new term for you. And it's kind of out there in the ether. It shows up in different ways and words like self-awareness and self-care. And that's kind of part of our everyday. But I think that we discount it for what it actually is. I think we think of it as like, okay, I've done some therapy, or I worked with a coach, or, I've done some personality assessments. I did my Strengths Finder and my Myers-Briggs, my Enneagram. And all of those tools are tools that we use to learn about ourselves. But that's not all that self-awareness is. It's not a one and done. Self-awareness is the relationship that we have with ourselves, and it is ongoing. It's always shifting, changing, and evolving. And it is the longest term relationship we have in our entire lives, longer than the work relationships we have, the relationships we have with spouses or lifelong friends. It is the longest relationship that we will have, the relationship with ourselves. And it's our responsibility to be in charge of how it evolves. It should not be something that just happens to you. You should have full say in the relationship that you have with yourself, because that relationship directly impacts how we see and interact with the people and the world around us. It directly impacts our level of success and how we feel about the success that we have. And if we even define it as success, it directly impacts how people see us and how we think about who we are in our world. And how you develop it, there are, I'm sure, a million philosophies about this, and there are 1,000 tools out there that can help you be more reflective and discover more about who you are. Therapy, coaching, and personality assessments are all tools. But the real work of understanding ourselves happens in between those tools. It happens in between the therapy sessions. It happens after the personality assessment. It happens after you go on that weekend retreat about self-care and taking care of yourself, or after you've done the week-long seminar on being an influential leader. The real work of it happens after those things, in between those experiences. And the real work is on you. So from my experience with my coaching, with my own personal work, my own personal journey, which has gone on for 25 years now, I bring it down to three practices of developing this self-awareness relationship that you have with yourself. The first is curiosity. My very first therapist, who you will hear me talk about every once in a while because the work that we did was incredibly profound, he said to me that he noticed that I had very strong emotional reactions to most things in my life. Something happened, I had an emotional reaction. Somebody said something, I had an emotional reaction. Something didn't happen, I had an emotional reaction. I even had emotional reactions about my own emotions. So if I felt sad or embarrassed or ashamed or less than, I would get mad at myself for feeling that way. I shouldn't feel this way. This is not how I should feel. And he said to me, Zovig, you seem to object to your own emotions, like it's not okay to have them. And my response was, well, what am I supposed to do? And he said to me, you could get curious about them. I could get curious about my own emotions. I'm not going to lie to you, that took some time to set in. It took several years to set in because, well, one, I don't think we're taught really to be curious about anything, if I'm telling the truth. I mean, we're taught to judge things. It's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong, it's yes, it's no, it's this or it's that. And judgment in this world is a helpful tool if we can discern what's good for us, what's not good for us, what will work, what will not. But I also believe that judging things so quickly without any time for curiosity or exploration can get in our way, and it can backfire. And over time, as the years went by and in my 20s and then through my 30s, I started to understand what getting curious about my own emotions and getting curious about myself meant. It meant asking the question, why am I the way that I am? And the second half of that question is, and does it work for me? See, there's nothing wrong with the way you are. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing broken. There's nothing to fix. But we are responsible for discovering parts of ourselves and how they developed so that we can make conscious choices about whether or not those behaviors and thoughts work for us. I am the way I am. I showed up a certain way. I learned a bunch of stuff. I, was bestowed some beliefs, and I have spent the better part of my adulthood challenging those things and asking myself, but does this work for me? For me, not for you, but for me. And without curiosity, I can't ask those things, and I get stuck and I can't evolve. Why am I the way I am? I'll tell you, it's part culture. It's part the fact that I'm a woman. It's part the fact that I just showed up with this personality. Our personalities are part developed and then part given. And so when we get to a point where we can think for ourselves and we have agency, we get to decide, does this part of my personality work for me? It was part of my personality for a long time to have a fiery response to things. I still have a great deal of fire in me, but I've learned to hone it and use it for good instead of evil, and use it not against myself. So asking ourselves, why am I the way that I am? Why do I respond like this? Why do I have these emotions? Why did I choose this? How did I get here? And does it work for me? Gives us more freedom. When I'm curious about myself, I have more personal freedom, because then I get to choose if that's the path I want to go down. And when you're curious about yourself, you can be curious about others. And that's when our relationships with everyone change. This does not mean you have to be friends with everyone or like everyone or bring everybody into your life. What it does mean is that it can bring more ease to even the toughest of relationships, because curiosity begets compassion, which is the second practice of developing self-awareness. Compassion for ourselves. When I get curious, then I can have compassion. My first instinct with anything for me is to judge myself. And I don't think I'm so special when it comes to this. I think this is really typical for the folks who are used to seeing themselves achieve. You get things done and you get results. You take an action, you produce a result, and you're just sort of used to that happening, so used to it that I've actually seen some of my clients get shocked when things don't work. When things kind of fail, they get surprised because they're so used to knowing themselves as a person who succeeds and gets done. And I could judge myself for everything. And I have: how I look, how I sound, how I coach, how I'm doing this podcast, how I did that client pitch, how I care for my dogs, what I said to my husband the other day. I mean, I can judge myself for pretty much anything. And I don't want to mix up self-judgment for self-reflection, because I think I used to do that. Well, aren't I supposed to always be looking at how I can do things better and how I can be better? Yes. But self-reflection does not require I beat myself up to do that. It's different than judging myself. When we judge, we are bad. We put ourselves into jail in our own minds. There's usually no way out. And I have coached people who will defend the judgment they have of themselves because they think it's the only way they're going to get better. I don't know if you've seen this meme that's gone around for years, and I think it started from this company called Some E-Cards. They made really snarky, sassy digital greeting cards. And this one in particular said, "The beatings will continue until morale improves." And I think that's how a lot of achievers work. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to grind harder. I'm going to get up earlier. I'm going to do more. I'm going to try really, really hard. Our world is set up with consequences. It's almost punitive sometimes. So we're conditioned, I was, to be hard on myself, to get the most out of myself. If I'm not hard on myself, then the fear was I'll get lazy. But think about this. When you're hard on someone else, what does that do for the relationship? It kills it. It's the same thing that happens with our relationship to ourselves. The harder we are on ourselves, the less compassion we have for ourselves, the more we chip away at our esteem, our confidence, our self-worth, the more disconnected we get from ourselves and what we want and what motivates us. Because over time, that chipping away tells us we don't actually deserve what we want. No compassion, no grace. When we don't offer ourselves those things, we become stuck. And then we become less able to make choices based on what we want. So one thing, and you'll find with me, I make a lot of disclaimers. I want to be clear about this compassion. Sometimes we can confuse being compassionate with ourselves or with others with being permissive or a lack of accountability. Like we're just letting things go. There's no accountability and laziness is okay. No. Compassion doesn't mean that I let myself off the hook for doing things that I've committed to. But I can be compassionate and still allow myself the opportunity to make mistakes and to learn from not being in those moments when I'm not perfect. We are still responsible for delivering in our lives, and the mistakes that we make need to be owned and rectified. It just doesn't mean that we need to do it by bashing ourselves over the head. That the beatings will continue until morale improves makes me laugh now because we so easily do that to ourselves, but that is no way to get the best work from who we are. That's no way to get the best life. That's no way to get things to feel good. Then we get very caught in this hard work and being productive and metaphors like grinding it and crushing it and essentially pulverizing ourselves. Oh my God, there's so much effort in all of that. And it can feel like this competition to prove ourselves. I remember when I lived in New York, I used to get to the office no later than 7:30 to 8 o'clock. And that was because I was at the gym at 5:30 or 6 every morning. I was very proud of that. I felt like it proved to the world that I could work the hardest. I knew I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the best marketer. I wasn't the most creative. I wasn't like the tippy top of just natural innate talent for what I did. But what I could do was grind. I was not afraid of the hours, and I was not afraid of continuing to try until something worked. The problem with all of that, being that person that was in by 8 and at the gym and, oh, you're so impressive because you do all these things. I was flipping exhausted. My joints hurt. I would crash on the weekends. And eventually I got really sick and I developed Graves' disease and hyperthyroidism from all the stress. And if you don't know Graves and hyperthyroidism, it's a beast. It took me down for the better part of 2 years. And then it took me another 3 to recover. I was producing, but I had zero compassion for how my body felt and how I felt. Let me tell you, it takes so little effort to be compassionate. It's so much less effort to be compassionate with myself than to grind myself. You will get results both ways, without question. I got results for many years with that kind of behavior. I see my clients get results from compassionless doing. The difference is you don't burn yourself out by being compassionate. So when we ask questions like, when does this get good? When we start being compassionate with ourselves, that's when it gets good. And the last practice of developing this relationship with yourself, self-awareness, is acceptance, self-acceptance. And this has 2 parts, 2 sides of the same coin, both accepting yourself for who you are and who you're not. Because the reality is I can't be everything to everyone. And honestly, I have no interest in it anymore. I spent many years trying to be everything to everyone. And I bet you don't have interest in being everything to everyone either. But maybe you still beat yourself up about it because you're not. This comes up a lot when we're in a situation where we are worried about not being liked. We want to try and be everything to everyone, or you just started a new job and you want to try and be the best and be, the analytic and the creative and the business savvy and the empathetic and all of the things all at one time. There are just some things we are and we are not. I am not the most patient person, particularly with myself. I am not the most patient when I'm in lines, when I'm on customer service calls. I'm not the most patient person. I used to be ashamed about that. I used to be, I tried to cover that up and pretend like I was, and that doesn't work. But I felt like I had to perform, and that didn't work for me. There are also situations where when we're worried about not being liked, and they can happen at work. So let's say you lead a team and you have to give a performance review or give some feedback on something that didn't go well. Some of us are just born with that ability. We're just really good at it. But I find that the ones who struggle to give feedback are the ones who are the most uncomfortable with getting feedback. And that's because they typically equate getting negative feedback with not being liked or not being enough. So when the time comes for them to deliver it to someone else, they struggle because they don't want the other person to not like them or to be responsible for that person feeling like they're not good enough. But if I accept myself for what I am and what I'm not, I can take and give feedback a lot easier. I can accept when something doesn't go the way I had planned. I can accept when someone doesn't like me or isn't on board with what I'm doing because I know who I am and I can take it or leave it. I don't have to have defensiveness about what I'm not. If I'm a leader, I can find someone who is good at the thing I'm not good at. I don't have to pretend to be good at everything. I have spent more years than I can count putting energy into fixing what I thought I should be. And I think that's how our world is set up. This is what you have to work on. This is where your areas of opportunity and growth are. If that sounds familiar to you from wonderful performance reviews at work, these areas of opportunity, sure, they're areas of opportunity, but sometimes I think that trying to be what we're not is just square peg, round hole. It's not the best use of our time. And once we decide that, we can also decide that it's okay for us to not be everything to everyone. Let somebody else be that thing that you're not. So it's just as important to accept what we are, who we are, and who we are not. Because when we stop worrying about what we're not, we stop worrying about proving ourselves, and we just start being ourselves. So that's the trifecta of self-awareness, the relationship that you have with yourself. Curiosity, compassion, and acceptance. And I think that once we get to that point where we're able to do those things and they become just what we do and who we are, like it's a default to be curious. It's a default to give myself the benefit of the doubt and be compassionate. It's a default to remind myself, oh yeah, that's not who I am. This is who I am. Then we can become more of those things for other people. And then things really start to shift in our lives. Self-awareness is so much more than just doing the therapy. It's knowing who you are because you've taken the time to look. And that shifts how we show up in our lives. And it shifts how we make our choices and how we connect with others. It makes things easier when we know ourselves. I'm not saying that things aren't hard or traumatic or painful. You'll learn over time. I don't believe that everything is hunky-dory and I don't wear rose-colored glasses. What I am saying is that who we are in those moments changes. Our relationship to those tough times, our interpretation and perception of those tough times changes. And we move through those moments with more trust in ourselves and more confidence and more ease. And that's why we're exploring self-awareness in this podcast from all different angles, because I've heard too many incredible people getting blocked, feeling let down by their own lives and confused as to how they got where they are, even though it looks really great on paper. Having the deep connection with yourself, that's the key. the more self-aware we are about anything, the more access we have to change the things that don't work and create the things that do. So if you've ever asked, when does this get good? Episode by episode, that's what we will be digging into. And speaking of other episodes, come back and listen to episode 2, where I'm going to talk about my 6 core principles of coaching, the principles that I bring into every single coaching engagement, no matter if it's a man, a woman, an engineer, a nonprofit professional, a lawyer, or a creative. I developed these principles through my own work, my studies and certifications, and through coaching incredible people. Thank you so much for listening. Lots of love and big energy. Take care. Hi, it's Zovig. Hey, if you like the show, I have a favor to ask. Pick up your phone, go to my show page, scroll to the bottom, and leave a 5-star rating and a short, meaningful comment about what you liked. And if for some reason you feel like you can't leave a review, then email me at zovig@boldnessablaze.com and tell me what you're looking for in a future episode. I promise to respond to every message.